Paper 1 begins with text 1 and question 1, which is 4 facts for 4 marks. You'll get a question like, identify 4 different types of job in the restaurant chain. So if you have a text on restaurants and on a restaurant chain, you might find that there are 4 facts, such as number 1, waiters work there. Number 2, cooks work in the kitchen. Number 3, managers work in the kitchen and office. And number 4, accountants work in the office. We're simply scanning for some key points and writing them down. Now we get to the interesting question, paper 1, question 2. And this is only for 6 marks, so it mustn't be too long, but you must do a good job of evaluating. Now there are some key structural features of your answer. Number 1 is you must answer from the given lines. Number 2 is you must use evaluative language to show you are evaluating how successfully they achieve what it's being said that they've achieved. And you need to give 3 reasons for your opinion using examples from the lines you're given. Now remember, evaluation is about making a judgment. We can use words like successfully, cleverly. Now, if they don't do something, or you think they're doing something different, you can say, well, there's limited evidence of this, while there is evidence of this. So it's your evaluation and it is your judgment. Now, whatever you do, please don't mention the picture. If there is an image or a picture, we are not evaluating that, we are evaluating language. So let's look at an example of paper 1, question 2. It's 6 marks for your question. You need to use examples from the extract, which means quotes. You must give 3 reasons, be making a judgment and using evaluative language. Let's read this text together. Before it happened, the kitchen had been a hive of activity for hours. The heat, the assault of overlapping voices, "Table 7, seasoned pork," had built to a crescendo. I remember the overpowering smell of cinnamon from the lamb tagine. Then silence. There was a sudden stillness, as if everything and everyone had been paused. I'm not sure if there really was a pause, or whether my memories changed everything with hindsight. I can't remember much detail about who was there or exactly what happened. I just remember the sharp steel knife, then the blood. It was my hand, but it didn't feel like my hand. Then the sound came rushing back. I heard screaming. It was my voice. Then the immense pain. Then nothing. Okay, let's think about a question 2 question. How does the writer, let's go back to this one, build up suspense while describing the accident? So in lines 1 to 15, the writer tries to build up suspense while describing the accident. Evaluate how successfully this suspense is achieved. And it'll be different every time you do this question. Give 3 reasons for your opinion and use examples. So we're thinking about suspense being built up while describing the accident. Okay, so pause the video. You can have a go at this, and then I'll go through a sample answer with you, which I'm going to do now. So we need 3 points. And so what I've done is I've tried to show you my evaluative language in bold and the fact that I've used firstly, secondly, and thirdly just to make sure I've made at least 3 points. Firstly, the writer deliberately builds up suspense by enticing us with the knowledge that something has happened before it happened, but then cleverly not revealing what had happened straight away. We know something has happened, and this successfully keeps me in suspense. Secondly, the writer puts the story on pause to describe the kitchen where the accident took place. He pulls us into the setting using sound imagery, so we can hear the shouting and the loudness of the restaurant with the exclamation, "Table 7!" All the while, the writer masterfully keeps us in suspense, waiting to know what happened, so my suspense grows. Thirdly, the writer carefully builds towards the accident because I can sense he is feeling overwhelmed. He's told us they've been busy, a hive of activity, and we can imagine the heat and noise is bothering him, so we sense something is bound to go wrong. He descriptively evokes the sense of being overloaded, and then with the word overwhelmed, we know he's not coping, which creates more suspense. Using the long pause with then silence, he then continues to withhold the revelation, but the tension is peaked, masterfully holding me in suspense until he reveals the accident with the knife. Now, there's so many other things you could have talked about and other ways you could have done this. We've got the firstly, secondly, thirdly, and we need your evidence as to how it makes you feel that you are held in suspense from what the writer's done. But we don't need language and things like that here. What we need has to be related to our evaluative answer. And then we move on to paper 1, question 3, language to interest and inform, for 8 marks. Now, how does the writer use language to interest and inform the reader? It says you should include. Please read that as you must include the things in the bullet points. So you need to use language and the effect on the reader. It says use examples from the whole text and relevant subject terminology. So we need to read through the whole text and start spotting what we can find. What does it mean when it says language? Well, we could talk about figurative language like metaphor, simile, hyperbole if it's there. We could talk about parts of speech like verbs, nouns, adjectives and adverbs if they're there. But whatever we talk about, we have to say what they are doing. What is the effect of the language on the reader? How does it interest and inform? Now, if you're struggling to find verbs or similes, you still need to be making sure that you answer this question. How does the writer hold your interest and inform you? So you could use something like denotes, a word denotes, and then talk about the dictionary definition of it and how that interests and informs, how it adds to this piece. You could talk about the connotations of a word. What does a word connote? Exploring the ideas or feelings evoked by the word. How does this interest or inform you? What is the effect? So we're thinking about how language is used to interest and inform the reader, and we're thinking about that text. So if you want to do this for yourself, go back and have a look at the original story and think about the language that's been used. You can pause the video here. And I'm going to show you how I've done this. So I've made some notes and underlined what I found interesting, the language that I found interesting. I'm not looking, first of all, at similes or verbs or anything like that. I'm looking at language that keeps my interest. I liked the hive of activity. I liked the heat, the assault of voices. I liked the overpowering smell. Now, you might pick something different, and that's fine. So I've talked about the imagery. I made notes. The sensory language pulls us into the situation. We feel the discomfort, and that creates a sense of suspense. And I've put here the alliteration of steel sharp knife draws us into the image of the knife. So when I talk about alliteration, I never use it on its own. What's the alliteration doing? What's it drawing my attention to? Well, I found the adjectives sharp and steel were what I was being drawn to. The shock of the revelation of the accident is enhanced by looking at sharp steel. We can visualise the knife and we can imagine the pain and terror of the narrator. And we can imagine how dangerous the knife was as well. So I've done an answer like this. The writer immediately grabs the reader's attention. The preposition of time in before it happened lets the reader know that he's about to narrate an event. The word it draws us in, acting as a hook. It makes us ask what happened, building suspense. The writer's use of imagery pulls us into the setting and the situation for the character. The use of sound, assault, voices is used where the word assault connotes a violent attack. We feel the narrator is finding the voices painful, and in the dialogue, the exclamation enhances the sense of people shouting across each other. Table 7. And I should have really continued that. I could have then said, again, just highlighting that the narrator is finding it really hard to hear and finding it uncomfortable to hear all the shouting. The sense of heat in the kitchen and the smell of cinnamon are all portrayed as having a cumulative effect in making the narrator feel unwell. The tension builds because we have empathy for him, as we feel him become increasingly uncomfortable. Alliteration draws us into the image of the knife. The adjectives sharp and steel create a vivid image of the knife and add to the sense of shock for us. And we have empathy for the narrator's horror as the writer reveals the accident. We can visualise the knife and imagine the pain of the accident keeping us hooked. Now, I think it would have been better if I'd even gone into the sharpness and the fact that it's still showing that would be really dangerous on the human body. So this would have been a really nasty accident. I didn't talk about sharp and steel in that much detail, but here we go. This is an example of a language answer. Okay, and now we get to 4A, and at this point we leave text 1 behind and we move on to text 2. Now, the kind of answer that we have on question 4A is looking for facts again. It will give you line numbers and you have to find explicit factual information. And this one on the next text is, how do we look for signs that a person might be unconscious? And here's the text. I don't consider myself a hero. I was just the right person in the wrong place. Funnily enough, I'd been forced to do my first aid training only the week before. I had no idea it would turn out to be so useful. Margaret, that's my sister, had laughed and said I'd be a terrible first aider. I'd agreed. I hate the sight of blood. I have very little sympathy for the afflicted. I struggle to keep my goldfish alive. Anyway, I'd just turned into St George's Street when I saw a man fall down. He was clutching his chest, and my first thought was that he might have had a heart attack, but he didn't look old enough. I looked around. Honestly, I was hoping that someone else was close who could take charge. There was another woman, but she rushed past, as though if she pretended not to be there, then she would be invisible. Realizing I was his only hope, I rushed to the man's side. He looked limp and didn't respond when I talked to him. That was a sign that he was unconscious. I touched him gently, then more firmly, but he didn't respond. Another sign. I knew what to do if he stopped breathing, or if his pulse felt faint, which it did. Shakily, I grabbed my phone and called 999 for an ambulance. I stayed with the man while the ambulance came, even though I didn't have to. I felt I needed to know he was okay. A young woman arrived and helped me move him into the recovery position. That first aid training turned out to be very useful. That man is now my husband. From lines 10 to 12, can we find 2 signs that a person might be unconscious? Pause the video and have a go. So here we go from here. Pause the video, I'm going to go through the answers. Let's have a look. So it could have been, may not respond to touch, or they may not respond to sound. And we got that from, he looked limp and didn't respond when I talked to him. That's 1. I touched him, then more firmly, but he didn't respond. Another sign. So there are 2 signs that he was unconscious, not responding to touch or sound. From this extract, this is question 4b, identify 2 reasons a person might need to call an ambulance. So we're looking at this section here. He looked limp and didn't respond when I talked to him. That was a sign that he was unconscious. I touched him gently, then more firmly, but he didn't respond. Another sign. I knew what to do if he stopped breathing, or if his pulse felt faint, which it did. Shakily, I grabbed my phone and called 999 for an ambulance. What 2 reasons might we need to call an ambulance? For what 2 reasons might we need to call an ambulance? Pause, write it down. So you could have put, they may stop breathing or their pulse may be faint. We're moving on to question 5 now. Evaluate with 3 reasons for 6 marks. So here's the text again, but it's one shorter extract of the text. It's another evaluate with 3 reasons. I'm going to go through the question with you. In this extract from the wider extract, the writer tries to entertain the reader. Now, always this is going to be a different word. It's going to be different. What does the writer try to do? In this extract, the writer tries to entertain the reader with how ill-equipped she is to be a first aider. Ill-equipped means she's not capable. Evaluate how successfully this is achieved and give 3 reasons from the text to support your answer. Well, pause the video and have a go. How does she show in an entertaining way that she really shouldn't be a first aider? And remember, you're evaluating, you're saying how successfully she does that. If you don't think it's entertaining, or you don't think she shows she's not equipped, then you can argue differently. It's your judgment. But please make sure that you give 3 reasons from the text, so 3 short quotes as you prove your points. Pause the video. Okay, so I haven't done a sample answer for you for this question. I'm hoping that you've had a really good go. For me, if I was looking for how it is successful and amusing, I might say the writer successfully entertains when she says she was the right person in the wrong place. Because what she continually shows us is that she really didn't want to be there. She really felt that first aid is something that she just never ever wants to have to do. And she shows that time and time again when she puts herself down. She uses the word forced to show us that she really didn't want to do it, proving that, she's not the ideal candidate. She says how her sister laughed and said she'd be terrible, and she agreed. And then she lists the reasons. And the reasons are, they're quite strong. So I would have said how strong the reasons were. I hate the sight of blood. That's a very good reason to not want to be a first aider. That really does show that she's ill equipped. And it's quite funny to think that obviously she is having to do it. So that's kind of amusing, I think. She then says she's got no sympathy for people who are ill, and the word afflicted means people really need sympathy. If they're afflicted, they're really poorly. She has no sympathy. Really, again, sounds like the last person who should be doing first aid. And then, if we didn't think she was being entertaining, she gives us this really exaggerated sentence: I struggle to keep my goldfish alive, which is quite funny. If she can't keep a goldfish alive, how is she going to keep a human alive? So, again, it really shows that she's not the right person. So I think enough. I've got sort of three reasons, but we could also have the honestly, I was hoping someone else was close by. Again, really showing that even in the situation, she's really desperate and she'd rather not be there. Then we get to question 6. Now, question 6 is the big evaluative question. Now, for this question, we refer to the whole source, and that might be slightly different. We might get a different understanding from the whole source than we do from an extract. In my view, this text persuades us that first aid training is important for everyone. Does it? Based on your evaluation of the text, how far do you agree with this opinion? Use examples from the text to support your evaluation. Now, we're going to want more examples this time. We're looking at whether it's persuasive. Now, remember, if you're going to talk about techniques, they're only going to be marked in terms of how they're successful. How do they help the text be successful in terms of persuading us? Or if it's doing something different to this and you don't agree with this statement, but you think it's successful in other ways, then state them. Make sure that even if you're naming techniques and using techniques, you are always using them in an evaluative way to say how successful they are or what they're trying to do. So this is worth 12 marks. I'd love it if you'd go back to the text, pause the video and have a go. Does the text persuade us that training is important for everyone? First aid training. Go back to the whole text. I'll just take you back here. You can pause the video here if that helps you. Pause the video. I'm going to move on. Okay, here's my example. Here's an example for me for a question 6 answer that I've done. In my view, the blog is successful overall in showing why first aid training is important for everyone. However, I'm not sure this is the writer's sole intention in the blog. The blog is also an entertaining anecdote on how the writer met her husband. However, through this anecdote, and if you don't know, an anecdote is like a short story to make a point that's often funny. However, through this anecdote, the theme that emerges successfully over and over is that first aid training should be for everyone. But we only understand this when we read the whole piece. For example, in the opening, the writer uses humour to firmly discount her ability and confidence as a first aider. She provides multiple reasons to prove to the reader that she'll be a poor or inept first aider. She uses the verb forced to show she did the training against her will. She says of herself she has very little sympathy for the afflicted, to evidence once again her lack of suitability for this task. As the word afflicted evokes the idea of human suffering, those people ought to have empathy. To further prove the point, she uses humour when she says she can barely keep a goldfish alive, and this exaggeration successfully makes a humorous point, because a goldfish, while it might be an important pet, is not as important as a human life. If she's as incompetent as that, then how could she be trusted with a human life? All these points are relatable. Many people are scared of first aid training for the same reasons, so she successfully relates to us. It seems, for the first half of the text, she's showing that not everyone should be a first aider. However, when we get to the scene of the heart attack, it is now revealed, and circles back to line 1, that our narrator actually has saved a life and is a hero, however much she'd like us to think she isn't. I don't consider myself a hero. As a reader, I like her more for saying this. We come to the conclusion that if she can do this, then so should everyone else. The writer successfully leads us to this moral while never stating it. She wins us over with humour to understand. She also uses the example of the character we're supposed to dislike, the lady who walked past as though invisible. This is both humorous and pointed. The writer makes the reader ask themselves whether they would do the same. This acts almost as a rhetorical device. It makes us question whether everyone should be equipped with these skills and shows that it's everyone's responsibility not to just walk by. So, yes, as a whole, this text does indeed very successfully show that anyone can and should do first aid. Now, you might have come up with something quite different, and remember, that's absolutely fine. It's about making sure that you have got evidence to prove the points you're making and that you are using the language of evaluation to see whether it is or isn't doing what the person has said. And finally, we get to question 7 and 8. And question 7, question 8 are your transactional writing. Now, what do we need to know for any piece of transactional writing? Well, you need to remember to make it interesting. So please do remember your DeForest techniques, things like if it's a particular text that would suit direct address, like a speech, to use it, and to use other interesting language devices. Make sure you're writing in paragraphs. Your marks will be limited otherwise. You can use the tip-top method to remember, tip-top standing for time, person, topic, and place. Every time you change topic or the focus or the person you're talking about or the place you're focusing on or the point you're making, leave a line and start a new paragraph. Every paragraph should be on one topic only, and it should be 3 to 5 lines long, 3 to 5 sentences. Please make your points in a logical and sensible order. Try not to make the same point and then the same point again and then a different point and then the same point again. You really do need to order it well. So a tiny little writing plan might be a very useful idea. Try to use a range of sentence styles and punctuation and a range of accurate punctuation at that. It's really important to make your writing interesting. Just because it's non-fiction, it doesn't need to be boring. So try and vary your sentence lengths to keep us interested. Choose good vocabulary. Even if you're not sure how to spell a word, it's better to try and use really good vocabulary. And try and use the correct format that you've been given. Use features from the format. If it's a speech, use the features of a speech, the direct address to the audience, an introduction, the DeForest techniques, rhetorical language, and make sure that at the end, you have a call to action. If it's a letter, again, that initial opening, that salutation, and that correct ending. And again, making sure that always you're writing in good paragraphs. So here's an example of a question 7. Write a speech for an 18-year-old student with the title Why Anyone Can Be a Lifesaver. A student started a response. Continue this speech using your own ideas. So many people count themselves out. They think that this or that thing is not for them. Life-saving, however, should be considered a skill more vital than reading, writing and maths. Continue the speech. Or you can choose to do question 8. In this case, write a letter to a local paper encouraging people to get first aid trained. Include, and you must include, all of the things in the bullet points if you do this one. Include why they should get training, the skills that they will gain, and how it will be useful to their lives and jobs. So again, I've tried to pull all of the paper together, what the questions will look like, key hints and tips, what the questions feel like, and giving you an opportunity to practice. So it's a really good idea to learn the questions that will appear on the paper in order so that you know them off by heart and you've got an idea of how you're going to tackle these prior to the exam. Really good luck with your revision and very best of luck with your exams.